probably the most real book that exists on planet Earth about human suffering and tragedy and faith, and it's in the Bible. We're allowed to ask these big questions. But the writer of Ecclesiastes told us in the third verse of chapter 1 that he's on a quest. And the quest that he's on is this. He says, "What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun?" That's what he's trying to work out. At the end of my life, when all is said and done, what will I have left to show for it? What's at the end of this thing called life? At the end of all of my working and all of my learning and all of my striving, what do I have to show for it? Effectively, he's saying, what is the meaning of life? What's the point of being here at all? At the end of it all, what's the point? I've asked that question to a few different people this week. What's the meaning of life? My sample size was very small and not particularly fair because I was just sat in Club Coffee and I asked whoever happened to be there, and most of them were the staff. But here were the answers that they gave me. The meaning of life is to live it to its fullest. The meaning of life is to have no regrets. The meaning of life is love. If you've got to have love, and then you're all right. How about this one? The meaning of life is to be happy. I think probably all those other answers are just another way of saying, do you know what, in life, what do I want to have to show for it at the end? A happy life. Happiness. To have no regrets, live life to the fullest, love, all those things. I just want to be happy. And in fact, that is what all of us are spending our lives on. That's the reason that we go to work or don't go to work, because we want to be happy. That's the reason that we pay for that holiday or that car or that gadget or whatever it is, because we hope, and this is what the advertisers tell us, that if we buy that thing, we're not just buying the object itself, we're not just buying that toothbrush, you're actually buying happiness that's contained in the toothbrush. Last week, I don't know why toothbrush came into my mind. There are plenty of other objects that make us happier, but dental hygiene is important, we can all agree. Last week, we looked at the start of the book of Ecclesiastes. We saw that actually the writer has some pretty negative conclusions. When he asked the question, what is the meaning of life and what do I have to show for it all at the end? He says this, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything, utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. And we looked last week about how that word meaningless is the Hebrew word hevel, which means smoke or vapor or mist. What is life? It seems solid and it seems so real, and that's why we're striving after happiness, like it's just there and I can just see it, and if I can work hard enough, I'll just be able to reach out and grab it. But at the end of all of the effort, when we grab it, it just turns into vapor, and it's not there. He says it's just smoke. That's what life seems like it is, and it's pretty hard to argue with the teacher's conclusions, because actually we see that all around us, that at the end of our lives, at the end of great people and all their achievements, in the end they are just forgotten. We looked at that last week as well. The teacher has the facts of life in front of him, and he's honest about it. It seems like there is no point. And yet the teacher also has his faith, and he's wrestling with this, and he knows that God has made him and God has made you for a purpose, that there is actually some meaning to life. And he's wrestling with this. What does it mean to be happy? God has made me. He's made me in this world. He's made me for a purpose. I feel like intuitively the purpose is to be happy. So how am I going to find that happiness? And that's what we're going to look at today in the passage of Ecclesiastes that we're looking at. It's the writer, the teacher, on a quest for happiness. And he shows us 7 ways that people search for meaning. Now, whether this actually happened to the teacher, whether he's thinking about things he's seen other people do, or whether it's just a thought experiment, we don't really know. And I don't think it really matters. Because what's really remarkable is that I think he shows us quite clearly the 7 ways that basically all different people search for meaning and happiness. So what I want you to do as we look through this is to think about which one of these describes best where I am right now. Where am I looking for happiness in my life in these 7 different ways? So he starts where we all do. And it's helped me as I've thought through this passage this week to think about these as stages of life in terms of as we grow up, These are generally the stages of looking for meaning that we all go through. So he starts where all of us did at one point, school, education. So let's read it together. Verse 12. He says, I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. He's a really optimistic guy. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, are chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who's ruled over Jerusalem before me. In other words, I've got more A stars than anyone I've ever met. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. So how has his trip in education gone? We all get sent to school as kids to find out about the world and our place in it. And the promise in education, and I can speak to this because I used to be a teacher, the promise that we make to kids is that if you succeed in education, you are going to be the person that you want to be. I used to say it as an English teacher, that GCSEs are like keys, and life is a series of locked doors. And the more keys you have, the more doors you can open, the more opportunities that you'll have. In other words, what we're saying to kids is, if you succeed in your educational journey, you can find happiness. Here's some quotes. I used to have motivational quotes like these around my classroom. Maybe not these ones exactly, but ones like this. Education is the most powerful tool that you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela. Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it. In other words, if you want to be happy in life, if you want to find meaning, get a good education. And so the teacher does that. He goes to school and he doesn't just do well. He is the top of his class. He absolutely smashes it. He says he applied his mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. He wasn't slacking. He didn't miss a single lesson. He turned up to everything. And he says, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who's ruled over Jerusalem before me. Did you know people like that in school who were like, I know more than all of you about absolutely everything? So, teacher, you've worked hard, you've got all your grades. Tell us, is education the thing that we need to find meaning in life? Can education truly change me and the world? What does he say? No. Education on its own isn't good enough. He says it's meaningless. Why? Verse 15, what's crooked cannot be straightened. What's lacking cannot be counted. When he says it's meaningless, he doesn't mean that there is no point in education. I'm a big believer in education. The fact that I can read is because I've been educated. It's good, right? The fact that we can sing these songs is because we've had an education. But what he's saying is that education can't fix the deepest problem of the human heart. What is crooked cannot be straightened. We are broken by sin, and education cannot fix that. What's lacking cannot be counted. This God-shaped hole that we have in us, no matter how many degrees you have up on the wall, it's not going to make you happy. The promise of education turns out to be empty. We are the most educated as a society that we've ever been. Are we happier? No. We're actually more miserable. We're more depressed. We're more anxious. Have we cured the human condition? No. And then he concludes that the more you learn about this broken world, the sadder you become. With much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. Have you ever felt tempted in this last year or so to just never read the news ever again? Why? Because the more we understand the complexities of situations around the world, the more utterly miserable and depressing it becomes. Knowledge brings sorrow. So, the teacher has decided meaning and purpose in life cannot be found in education. Happiness can't be found there. So he then goes on to the next thing that many of us have done. After school, we decide we're either going to take a gap year or we're just going to have a good time. And that's what he decides to do. He decides to party. We read in chapter 2, verse 1, he says to himself, "Come, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good." But that also proved to be meaningless. "Laughter," I said, "is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives." So education doesn't make him happy. So he gets some mates and he goes drinking down the pub and he has a great time. And they go and they watch some comedy and they're laughing and they're just doing whatever they want to do. Picture in your mind like the classic gap year or Friday night with the girls or a lad's holiday. They drink, they party, they're after the good life. You know, I think the picture that comes up often that makes me quite envious on my Facebook feed is someone sat by a pool with a beer in their hand and it's like 11 o'clock in the morning and they're like, better than a day at the office, right? That is what this guy is experiencing. So how does it go? He says, pleasure proved to be meaningless. The hangover after the party takes its toll on his life. He realizes there's this never-ending quest to make tonight the best night ever, always trying to recreate moments and always failing, always hoping that this night out is going to live up to the hype. And later he decides that laughter is madness. Robin Williams, famous comedian who tragically took his own life, said that comedy can be a cathartic way to deal with personal trauma. I love comedy. I like watching comedy shows on Netflix. Laughter can certainly help us cope. But does it fix the root problems? Sadly, not for Robin Williams or for other so-called funny men. So education hasn't helped him find ultimate meaning. Partying hasn't helped him find ultimate meaning. It was a good distraction for a bit, but in his quest, he's decided, okay, maybe now it's time for me to get a bit serious. Maybe now it's time for me to knuckle down. I've gone through school, I've got my GCSEs, and I've done all the crazy stuff with my mates, and I've lived a wild life, and that was fun while it lasted, but now I'm really gonna find the meaning of life. So what does he do? Probably what many of us have done. Decides to get a career. Now I'm gonna get a proper job, and this is going to satisfy me, he thinks. Verse 4, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. The teacher here, he doesn't just get a job to pay the bills. He decides he's going to be the boss. It's quite easy for him because he was the king in Jerusalem, so that was a step up the ladder for him. But he decides he's not just going to do some work to fill his time. He actually wants to make a contribution to the world. He wants to leave his mark. He wants to build something great. And all of that would have taken a lot of hard work and effort. He undertakes, he says there, great projects. Buildings and vineyards and gardens and reservoirs. He's a massive businessman. Takes a lot of hard work. Investment banker David Rockefeller said this: success in business requires training and discipline and hard work. But if you're not frightened by these things, the opportunities are just as great today as they ever were. And that is the promise that the teacher is chasing. That if he just works hard enough, if he just succeeds in his business enough, maybe then he's going to be happy. But it's clear that these projects weren't enough. He didn't fail in them. Actually, he succeeded. And yet that wasn't enough either. I listened to a fascinating podcast this week with heavyweight champion, property mogul, and soft drink peddler Tyson Fury, who's a very interesting character. But he said that once he reached the top of his career in 2015, when he beat Vladimir Klitschko, he said that he felt suicidal for weeks afterwards. And the reason was because he'd worked so hard to achieve his goal, and that he got to the top of the mountain and realized that the view wasn't worth the climb. That he'd got all the way there, he'd got to the end of the ladder, and there was nothing left. And so the teacher, so far, he's found this as well. He does these projects, he succeeds in his business, and that he's still empty. It's meaningless. It seemed solid, and he grasped it, and it was just a cloud. It was empty. So, at this point, the teacher then thinks, maybe I've been thinking too small. I've done education, I've done partying, I've done the career, and I've absolutely smashed it. That's not enough. Maybe now I just need to go for gold. Maybe I need to do the thing that everyone says I should do. Maybe I should pursue the good life. So next, he goes for the unholy trinity of money, sex, and power. He decides, that's it, I'm just going to go all in and have the best possible time that I can. I'm going to live the type of life that movie stars live, that celebrities live, and I'm going to see, does this make me happy? Verse 7, I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. By the way, when he says there, in all this, my wisdom stayed with me, he's not saying that what he did was good. What he's saying is that he hadn't taken leave of his senses, that he was still on the quest. How do I become happy? So slaves and herds were a way that kings displayed their wealth. It's the yachts and watches and sports car of the day. Forget Tinder. This teacher has a harem of women that he can access whenever he wants. He has all the power in the city. He truly is the big dog. He is at the very, very top. Surely he's happy now, right? Surely this is it. He's got it all. Jim Carrey, the comedian, famously said, I think that everyone should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer. And the teacher in Ecclesiastes would agree. It's just hevel. It's meaningless. It's a chasing after the wind. Okay, so far, he's failed in his quest. And he sums up what he's found so far in his quest in verse 10. He says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. You know, what's the classic Disney catchphrase that so many people are living their lives by? Follow your heart, right? Look within and follow your dreams and your desires, and if you work hard, then you'll make it and then you'll be happy. He's saying, I've done exactly that. I followed my heart. I followed my dreams. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. He's saying, I enjoyed the process. He's not there with regrets. He's saying, hey, I had a good time and I worked hard and I did great things. Verse 11, yet when I surveyed all my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. At the end of my life, what's going to happen to the vineyards? Someone else is going to have them, or they're going to grow weeds. And what's going to happen to the buildings? Well, they'll fall down eventually. What's going to happen to the parties and the good nights? Well, they're already just a memory. What's going to happen to my education? Who'll care what GCSEs or degree I had when I'm dead? This is the point that many people reach. Jim Carrey, Tyson Fury, many other people have articulated the meaninglessness of their successes. But the question at this point is, what do you do next? When you realize that nothing in this world is going to satisfy you, what do you do? There's another great quote from Jim Carrey that Ollie sent me a while back. This is Jim Carrey's acceptance speech at the Golden Globes. He delivers it much better than I do, as you'll appreciate. But he says, when I go to sleep at night, I'm not just a guy going to sleep. I'm two-time Golden Globe winner Jim Carrey going to some well-needed shut-eye. He's just won this award, right? And when I dream, I don't dream any old dream. No, sir, I dream of being three-time Golden Globe winning actor Jim Carrey. Because then I would be enough. It would finally be true. And I can stop this terrible search. And everyone's laughing, right, in this speech as he says this. For what I know ultimately won't fulfill me. He doesn't know what to do next. And he says it tongue-in-cheek, and yet that's exactly what he is still continuing to do. And as I listen to this podcast, it's still what Tyson Fury is continuing to do. It was quite sad, actually. The guys interviewing him in this podcast were saying, Tyson, just retire. You've done it all. You don't need to keep on trying to prove yourself. And he's like, I have nothing else. If I don't do the next fight, then what? And they said to him, which I thought was so profound and so Ecclesiastes, Tyson, it won't be another boxer who finally puts you down. It'll be Father Time who wins the fight in the end. And at this point, many people have a midlife crisis. I've reached the top of the hill, now what? And that's exactly what happens to the teacher. He has a bit of a midlife crisis. Verse 12. Then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what's already been done? Again, he's riffing on this theme. The person who comes after me is not going to do any more than I've done. I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise have eyes in their heads, and the fool walks in darkness. But I came to realize the same fate overtakes them both. Father Time will kill us all, whether we're good or bad, successful or failures, wise or foolish. Then I said to myself, the fate of the fool will overtake me also, meaning I too will die. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless. For the wise, like the fool, will not be remembered. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. You can't work or train or educate yourself out of the reality of death. Whether you succeed or fail in life, the same outcome comes to us all. So the teacher then thinks, well, what's the point? And then he has what I think we could describe as a dark night of the soul. Verse 17. So I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who's not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What do people get for all their toil and anxious striving at which they labor under the sun? All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. I don't know if you've seen the TV show Succession, but that's the theme of it, isn't it? This great businessman decides, who do I leave everything to? Well, they're all idiots. So what choice should I make? And that's what he's saying. I'm going to leave all this to someone. It's pointless. Check out how many times in what we've just read he uses words related to work. I've put them in bold for you. The work that is done under the sun. I had toiled, toilsome labor, toil, anxious striving, work. He says, what more do you want? He's kind of screaming at the universe, maybe at God. He's saying, I've done everything I was meant to do. I've got the education, I've done the partying, I've done what Instagram told me to do to live my best life. What more do you want? I've given it all, I've worked so hard, and I'm still miserable. And into his dark pit of despair, a beam of light shines at the end. It's our last stage in his journey for meaning. There is, in his darkness, in his despair, light at the end of the tunnel. So far, he's been working really, really hard. I think you'd agree. This quest for happiness has not been easy for him. He's done it all. He's worked super hard, but now he has an epiphany. So, zoom in. Verse 24. A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This is his conclusion. This is his epiphany. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. He's not quite there, but he's discovered a secret. He's discovered that true happiness can't be found by working for it. True happiness can't be earned. True happiness can't be found by striving for it. Happiness can't be gained. It has to be enjoyed as a gift. That's what he concludes at the end. That's what he discovers. He discovers that happiness, as we saw with the kids, is like a finger trap, that the more we strive and the more we toil and the more we try, it doesn't work. But the moment that we let go and the moment that we surrender and the moment that we acknowledge we are owed nothing, that is when the door to happiness is open to us. He discovers that happiness has to be enjoyed as a gift, that the more we strive, the less happy we become. So far in his quest for happiness, God has not been mentioned at all. Now suddenly in this epiphany moment that he has, God is mentioned 3 times. Why? Because he's discovered, he realizes that happiness, meaning, purpose, satisfaction is a gift from God. That's what he says. Satisfaction, I see, is from the hand of God. Where does lasting satisfaction in life come from? According to the teacher of Ecclesiastes, only in God. In his whole quest, he's done everything, hasn't he? He's eaten what he wants, he's drunk what he wants, he's learnt what he wants, he's partied like he wants to. And what he's saying here is that eating on its own doesn't necessarily lead to satisfaction. We've all wolfed down meals, right, that we've just eaten for the calories or without even tasting it. He's discovered that education on its own doesn't complete us, work doesn't give us joy, laughter and wine don't automatically result in happiness. But what transforms all of those things from a thing that we're chasing after to give us happiness to something that actually we can find satisfaction in is when we receive that thing as a gift from God. Not as something that we're entitled to or have earned, but something we've been given by grace. Do you understand what he's saying there? He's saying, God does not owe you anything. God does not owe me anything. And we live in such an entitled world, don't we? I even heard it on the radio this morning, talking about the weather. What do they say? We deserve a bit of sunshine. That's what they said. Don't we? God or climate change or whatever it is. Because of what we've been through, we now deserve some sunshine. It's not that we can say, thank you, God, that it's sunny today, and thank you that I can enjoy that. No, this is what I've earned. I've gone through enough months of rain and darkness. Now this is what I deserve. The writer of Ecclesiastes would say there's something about that mentality that robs us of joy when you think that life is something that you are owed as opposed to something that God has given you. If I died today, I should have no complaint against God. He's the author of my life. He can do what he wants with my life. That is the point of the book of Job, right? In the book of Job, if you've read it, God gives Job everything, and then God takes everything away from Job, and at the end, he gives it all back to him. And he never tells Job a clear answer, apart from showing Job, I am God, and you are not. I am the author of life, and you're a creature. You are not the creator. God owes us nothing. I think that's really hard for us to get into our heads. But the beautiful thing the Bible tells us is that this God who owes us nothing has given us everything. Isn't that so kind? He owes us nothing. This world could easily be completely grey. We could easily have like half the IQ that we have. Food could just be grey sludge. But he hasn't done that. He's given us roast dinners and daffodils and sunshine and the ability to make music and enjoy music and read and laugh. God is a good father who has given us good gifts. We're meant to see the goodness of life and turn with thanksgiving to God, because all of the gifts of God are meant to connect you and I to the source of the goodness itself, to God himself. Here's one of my favorite verses in the Bible, 1 Timothy 4, verse 4. For everything God created is good. Sometimes think that Christians are like really against fun or against like the world or, against wine or against parties or against whatever. Like, look at the life of Jesus, water into wine, parties everywhere, friend of sinners. Everything God created is good. Nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving. That's what changes it. From this is something I am owed. This is something that if I pursue it and if I squeeze the life out of it, I'll find happiness for me. To go from thinking about things and life like that to saying, this is something that I have been gifted. I don't deserve it. I haven't earned it. And yet, God has given it to me. education, friends, work even, a gift from God. So that changes how we live in at least 3 ways as we come to an end. That's my timer noise there to tell me to shut up. As we end, this should change how we live in at least 3 ways. 1, it should enable us to be present in the moment instead of constantly striving for the future. I want to challenge us this week to do one thing that we actively receive as a gift from God. To sit and listen to some music, or to look outside at nature, or read a book, or whatever it is, and to actively do that thing, saying, God, this is a gift from you. This isn't my me time at the end of the day that I've earned. This is something you've graciously given me. I want to encourage you to find one thing this week and to actively be present in the moment and to say, thank you, God, for the gift of life. So that should enable us to be present in the moment instead of striving for the future, instead of viewing everything as a stepping stone to getting to a place that I hope I'll be, and then I'll be happy once I've had X, Y, and Z. Because the message of Ecclesiastes is all the stepping stones go nowhere. And actually, it's the present moment. It's the life you actually have right now that is the gift from God, not the life you hope you might have in the future. The job you have right now, the kids you have right now, the home you have right now, contentment is where the joy is found. Contentment in life as a gift from God. So, we should be present in the moment instead of striving for the future. Secondly, I think that what the teacher is trying to teach us here should enable us to be generous with our stuff. He would say to us, nothing that you have is yours by right. It's nothing that you have got solely as a result of your own effort. And we, again, live in a culture that tells us, my money is mine. Who hates taxes? Most of us, right? Why? I've earned that. My money. Don't you dare take that from me to pay for hospitals or nurses or potholes. Who made me able to work? God. Who made me able to earn money? Who made me with the brain I have and the body that I have and the energy that I have? Who made the food that I need in order to go to work, to be energized? God is the source of everything. So all of my stuff is actually a good gift from God to me, not something that is mine, something that is his, that I can therefore share and be generous with other people with. So be present in the moment, be generous with our stuff. Thirdly, the things that we've talked about and that the teacher is teaching us should enable us to deal with failure. Life, the teacher would say, is not a pass or fail test. Life is not a game for us to play that we need to win. Our days are not given to us by God in order for us to maximize their potential or to squeeze the life out of them. I wonder if you've heard the phrase carpe diem. It's in Latin, it means seize the day. How about this? And that's the message of our culture, right? Seize the day. How about this? Instead of seizing the day, we need to receive the day with whatever it brings. Receive the day that you have tomorrow as a gift from God. Job said in his own suffering, shall we accept good from God and not trouble? That's a hard verse to think about, isn't it? Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? And the verse goes on and says, in all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Tomorrow, as you go to work or school or whatever you do, it might be a great day. It might be a really hard day. It might feel a day like you're winning or a day like you're failing. What if somehow in all of it, in the ups and downs, in the rough and in the smooth, God is giving us gifts that we can't even understand? What if not just in the successes, but what if in the failures, God is working all things together for our good and his glory? What if it's true that in our light and momentary troubles, God is achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all? What if God's plans really are to bless us and to keep on blessing us? What if, in the tears and in the heartache and through the great clouds of dread that seem to blot out the sun of the love of God in your life, he intends to pour his blessings down on your head? That's the message of the Bible. God is completely and utterly for you. Does that mean that tomorrow is going to be a day of success? No. We look at Jesus, the Son of God, loved, beloved Son of God, who goes to a cross and who dies. Why? Because somehow in that, God was working good. Life is not about succeeding. This should enable us to deal with failure because life is a gift to us. Are we ready and humble enough to accept whatever gifts God gives us tomorrow, whether they're easy or hard? This whole message, I think, as I close, should not be a surprise to us. Life isn't something we have to earn or strive for. It's not about us working our way up the ladder of success, because we've seen in so many examples that doesn't make us happy. Life is a gift from God. That should not be a surprise if we're Christians, because that is the whole message of Christianity, a message of grace instead of works. Ephesians 2, verse 8 to 9 says these words: "It is by grace that you have been saved, through faith. And this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." The greatest gift that you and I can ever receive is the gift of the forgiveness of God, bought with the blood of the Son of God on the cross. The greatest gift, greater even than our life, is the forgiveness of God for us. That has been given to us as a gift that we can never earn, that we don't deserve. That if we try and earn our way there, we will only fail. So how much more should we view everything else in life as a gift? Sometimes humility is the hardest virtue to have, isn't it? Because we want to earn stuff, and we want to think we're entitled to things, and we don't like saying sorry. But the message of Christianity is that humility is the way to joy. To say, actually, today I will receive whatever you have for me, God, because I trust that you are greater, that you are wiser, and that you are better. Strange and perplexing are the means by which God gives us his gifts, but they are good nonetheless. Let's pray, and then we'll have some time to respond. Lord God, as we've gone through this journey, we've seen ourselves, I pray, I hope, in some of the attitudes of the teacher and some of the things that he sought for meaning and purpose. And Lord, right now in this moment, we want to come to you, maybe for the first time, maybe for the 100th time, and say, Lord, forgive me for striving for happiness in all the wrong places. Forgive me for thinking that I could earn my way to meaning in life. Forgive me for my entitlement, thinking that you owe me the life that I imagine I should have. Thank you, God, that even though you owe us nothing, you have given us so much. We're so grateful for your love. We're grateful for the very breath in our lungs. We're grateful for our life. Lord, I pray that you would transform us into people who are content and who actually are happy because we've received life as a gift from you. In Jesus' name, amen.